Don in London, hello. It's February the 12th, 2013, just after, just 8:19 coming up to 8:20. I can just hear the truck pulling up to get the bottles out from across the road. The restaurant of many hundreds of bottles of wine drunk last night. I don't drink anymore. My videos are all about recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour, and my substance was alcohol. Alcoholic in recovery these days, one day at a time. Courtesy of professionals who got me on track to start with and said, "Have you ever thought you might be an alcoholic?" And I said no, because drink wasn't the problem, it was everything else. And of course drink was the problem. So after they dried me out, they said maybe it's a good idea to go to this fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, well, okay then, and I went reluctantly, because it was the last chance saloon of living without a drink. So I wasn't too happy to be going there. And then I suddenly realised that, my life had got to the very last stages too many times, and I couldn't get out of it on my own. So it was either keep on drinking to oblivion and end it and not wake up anymore, and I've been nearly there before, or okay, if it's got this bad and I'm still alive, maybe I can ask for help and I can do something about it. And it was a rocky road. It wasn't easy, and I made it more difficult for myself because I'm a proper alcoholic, resentful, stubborn, defiant, in denial, all those things. So I earned my recovery, and it is just for one day. Life can be as good as it gets today. So how did fellowship help me? The fellowship of AA, by listening and joining in and sharing and being a part of all the things I was very reluctant to do, because it exposed my weakness, my powerlessness over drink. And then it made me realise I'm pretty much powerless over everything else that's going on in the world. The only thing I have freedom in is the choices I make today, how I connect, be included, love people, and that's what fellowship helps me do. And there are 12 steps to help me as an individual learn how to be open, honest and willing to change, have courage and faith and confidence, and also deal with discouragement, no confidence and dishonesty in myself first, before I even think about other people. So in other words, getting my own act together. So how does fellowship help me? Number one, it's anonymous. So what goes on within is a place of sanctuary to find out who you are, your truth, and how you want to live your life, or how you need to live your life. Cover your needs and lower your wants so they go away. You can still need things. It's a very good idea to be needy to a degree. Need the right things in life. Sober, honest, values and food and a roof, if possible. It wasn't possible for 9 years for me to have a roof over my head, and it was a difficult time. Anyway, got to fellowship, and this is the AA preamble shared at the beginning. I just say now, I do not speak for anyone in AA, and I do not speak for AA either. I share how experience has helped me in fellowship and the 12 steps of living. So the preamble is this: you know it if you go, and this is how it starts if you don't go. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. That's it, a desire. You don't have to stop, it's a desire to stop. There are no dues or fees for AA membership, so you don't have to pay anything. We are self-supporting through our own contributions, but if we have a few pennies, we help cover the rent, tea, biscuits, and a bit of literature. AA is not allied with any sect or me, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. So all the crap we have in our heads, or rather our personal beliefs and opinions, not crap, which are solid and foundations for our life, we keep all those things. because our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So the fellowship is there for one thing, and then we can do whatever we want. So if we put sober first, and the rest of life can happen. And for me, it comes down to some very simple things. But I make it complicated, because I'm a human being. So February is all about step 2, came to believe a power greater than me could help restore me to sanity. And the higher power is a personal outlook. What helps me on a daily basis? People. The wisdom of other people helps me daily live life. So if that's a higher power, and it is in my life, the combined wisdom of the universe is out there, and when I have a need or a problem, ask for help. Research it as well. Do my bit in the whole thing. I've got this far, I need some help. Anybody out there? And so that's how it starts. Anyway, I'm sharing my recollections and feelings this morning. So, February 12th, 2013, 8:30 coming up. A brave face. This is me, a brave face. A stiff upper lip, and fear can make a person suffer paranoia, and then we take the edge off. So, I was always told, put on a brave face, show no emotions, certainly don't show fear, and if you get a bully in your way, bully them back. Horrible. And fear behind that, fear of not being good enough, fear of other things in life. I don't know where they were, but there were some fears there. So why not take the edge off? And I used to with a drink. Always having to put on an act in public and feel like we are in the spotlight makes a person two-faced. And I don't mean that nastily. There's a spelling error here as well. Two-faced, two sides to us, the public face and the private fears. Sorry, I sometimes have to correct as I go because that's the only way I can do it. The public face of being okay, and the private face, the inner world, afraid to share the truth of who we are. The dilemma in fellowship, a desire to be open, honest and willing with the world, and yet the world we feel is making us closed down, dishonest and unwilling to share the truth of who we are, to the point where we just don't know who we are anymore. And that's where I got to with drink. I lost my complete identity. And before that, my identity was based on my career and the amount of money I could earn, which was not a very good way of measuring a human's worth. But beware, human resources is about what's that man worth, what's that woman worth. Not nice. And you know, the surface values that some people say they have, open, honest and willing, are they really open, honest and willing, and are they sharing the truth? Because in organisations, if you share the truth of who you are, what will happen? I don't know these days. How on earth can we get help when we are driven mad, trying to look right in front of other people? And that was me. I used to have to do a lot of looking right in front of other people. Have you ever felt when you have gone to see your doctor or made an appointment, before you get to the consultation, that you feel okay and don't need to go in and see him or her? It's weird. I always used to feel better just before I was going in to see the doctor. It's like adrenaline rush or something. Why am I here? I'm sure I can sort it out on my own. And that kept me in denial all over the place for a lot of things. I don't feel well, and yet I need to suck it up and not show weakness. How often do we hear suck it up? Fuck you, I'm not going to do that. Sorry. On the other hand, you know, going to see a medical practitioner with a minor ailment and then breaking down in the consultation and sharing just how fed up and depressed you are. I can remember going to the doctors, having decided not to jump off Chelsea Bridge, and saying, I just don't feel right. And he said, where have you come from? I said, well, I've just come from Chelsea Bridge. Anyway, and then I broke down. I was inconsolable for months, in a right old anxiety state. I was fed up. Usually in my case it would have to be knocking on heaven's door before I'll go see a doctor, and that's what it was. These days I'm not so bad about this phase of denial. I still have it, denial that is, and it takes quite a while for me to emerge and tell you the truth when things are tough and difficult. They're not tough and difficult at the moment, but you know, denial is there. If I wasn't feeling right, would I put on a show here? No, because there's no point. There's no point in that. And there have been times recently where I've said I'm not well. I've had sleeplessness and nightmares, and those are common, or were common for me in early recovery, because my brain was resorting a load of stuff whilst I was trying to work out how to sleep. And of course sleep did come eventually, but then the nightmares came too, so it was a very reluctant recovery. Anyway, step 2 came to believe that a power greater than us could restore us to sanity. It still remains one day at a time for me. Denial is part of the killer malady. You know, denial is working against us because we're not able to deal or cope with the truth of now. Pretending to be okay when we're not, and holding on to old ideas about recovery can be as corrosive as the old behaviour from the past. And I have friends, for example, who went to proper meetings of AA. What do I mean by proper? Following the guidelines of the fellowship and the traditions, rather than some notion of joys of recovery where nothing goes wrong and we're all very happy and we'll all get on with each other and phone each other at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8:05, or they have 25 sponsors had 500 sponsees, all that malarkey. That's power, control and growing your own little empire if you're not careful, because it's based on control. There is no way one individual can have 25 sponsees and devote enough time to the 12 steps, which is why we have sponsors, and the joys of recovery where nobody has a bad day. Fuck them. Just thought I'd mention my personal opinion. Step 2. And being restored to sanity on a daily basis is contingent on me asking for help. Asking through prayer, meditation and some simple routines. How am I feeling? Why? And what can I do about it? How am I feeling right now? Why? And what can I do about it? Well, I can do many things. I can check out my feelings. I checked out my feelings. And what did I say here? Am I making sure my basic needs are covered? By the time I got to this part of my daily reflection this morning, I've only been awake for a few seconds. How am I feeling? Thirsty. Blood sugar's too high. What can I do about it? Test my blood sugars. What are they? 24. Jesus Christ, that's 4 times higher than they ought be to be normal. So, long-lasting insulin, 1 injection. Fast-acting insulin, 1 injection. And it sharpened me up because that was about 4 hours ago. So I'm back to normal blood sugars. I missed a bit out about this step 2. Yes, came to believe that a power greater than us could restore us to sanity. It still remains one day at a time. Denial is a part of the killer malady. Pretending to be okay when we are not. And holding on to ideas about recovery can be as corrosive as the old behaviour from the past. Even in meetings of the fellowship, it can be difficult to share the absolute truth of our situation, because we want to demonstrate just how sober we are to our friends. Which is why I always emphasise that recovery is for one day, and tomorrow I don't know whether life is going to be good, bad or ugly experience, which can throw me off balance. And sometimes that we are not okay. Right, say that again. And often I say to myself, I just feel good enough. Just feel good enough for one day. Because I may have had a rough day because of diabetes or whatever, type 1, courtesy of being in recovery long enough to get it through having an operation. And dealing with it on a daily basis. Well, I don't deal with it, I don't control it. I live type 1 diabetes as well as recovery. Unfortunately, the recovery in fellowship helps me cope with type 1 diabetes. That's the word I was looking for. Cope. I feel good enough for one day, and it is hard to admit sometimes that we are not okay, because we just don't want to burden the rest of the world, because the world will not understand us. That's what we feel, that we can't share the truth. And these can be ugly parts to our recovery, doing the same thing over and over again, going to meetings, being silent, and yet full of discomfort and uncomfortableness about ourselves, because it's too painful to admit the truth of life, that life feels wrong, and we feel wrong-footed. And that happens. And you know, when I was saying fuck you to the joys of recovery people who never have a bad day, I do say fuck you, because you're actually undermining the recovery of other people I know. And a friend of mine went to the joys of recovery, started taking it on board, and then got completely wound up, because outside they was pretending to be alright, and yet internally the conflict was, I don't feel alright, I feel terrible, but these people say if I say I'm alright, I'll be alright. Fuck you, whoever you are. Yeah, it does make me angry, but not enough to go out there and hit them. I just say fuck you and start again. Anyway, I've only been awake a few seconds. That's when I said, hopefully before my denial kicks in and tells me I'm not that important, to even look at my own feelings this morning. Everything out there is more important than me. Somehow gentle daily reflections and asking myself, and the powers greater than me, to try and keep me sane today is a really good start. Meditating with how I am feeling. I might feel good, I might feel bad, I might feel life is ugly. Sometimes I really do think life is ugly. Feel it ugly as well. At least, if I know my mood, I know how my thinking may go, and the actions I may take will reflect my mood completely. Restoration of sanity is a daily endeavour, not only for those in recovery, it is a universal need in a mad, mad world. So to translate that, if I feel good, most likely I think good, and most likely my actions are good. And I won't say fuck you to the rest of the world, because that's where it starts, the fuck it button as it's called. And when you press the fuck it button, in sobriety, you may be going for a relapse, or you're going for an emotional bender, which is just as bad, because it's not going to help you. But we do get mad and insane and driven mad by what's going on. Anyway, here's this. European meat eaters may be feeling somewhat alarmed. I reckon Shrek might feel the same way about donkey. Somebody has been supplying horses and donkey meat as beef. And what's wrong? And that's what's going to happen now, when consumers are used to eating this new recipe of horse meat and donkey meat, and then they get their beef back in their food. I wonder if a stock cube manufacturer will be able to come up with a horse stock and donkey stock cubes, so people don't feel they're missing the vital ingredients they have been enjoying for some time. Putting profit first. This is a big topic at the moment. Morality is far behind. It is distasteful, especially if you are a horse or a donkey. Cows just ruminate on it. And what about Barclays Bank? Moving away and closing down its tax avoidance departments, which provided huge profits at the expense of the ordinary people having to eat horse and donkey. And Bob Diamond, with apparently or allegedly £120 million of earnings in the bank, as is suggested last night on TV. Paranoia. It's called Panorama, but I often call it Paranoia. I wonder if he's enjoying his beef today. And what about the politicians with their snouts deep in the trough and the gravy train covering up whatever it is they consume at our expense today? And you know what, with government officials, our National Health Service in the UK, how is it that a minister is so naive that he wanders into a hospital in Staffordshire and examines 2 wards specially prepared for him to look perfect, and in other parts of the hospital over the years, hundreds have died from neglect. How naive do we think politicians who ride about in their big cars and travel on trains on their own with their special protection unit? I wonder why they need special protection people. They go visit things which have been set up so they look right, and then broadcast it as if everything's right in the NHS. And yet if you go to a hospital and see what's going on, and you wander around the wards, because all the public can do that in most places, they're quite open buildings, you will find it's not quite like those two perfect wards. It's like the reports which followed on a few years later, that people weren't doing their jobs properly. And that can make you mad, especially if you're a type 1 diabetic. I'm very lucky. My hospital, well, to all intents and purposes, it's doing very well. It's looked after me, my mum, and other people I know extraordinarily well, even when we didn't want to go in and be taught how to do certain things, like what do you do if you've got type 1 diabetes, and how to do the injections and all the rest of it. Diet, organisation, not easy. So, you know, when these fat cats go around saying, ooh, we've got to cut costs and do all this stuff, they're not cutting their wages, they've got their noses in the trough. And why is it we can watch a documentary about the life of penguins? Yeah, why am I talking about this? Yes, why is it that we can watch a documentary about the life of penguins, which was on last night, after the Panorama programme, about the excesses of bankers? Penguins, including their love life, and find it so emotional we could cry. And why is it that we can listen to the news about nuclear bomb experiments in North Korea, mass killings all over the world, and skate over the impact that that has on people? Some things are too big to relate to. We rationalise the deaths of millions yearly, and can only relate to the life of penguins one day at a time. Traumatic stress disorder and inhumanity pervade, they always have, human life devalued day by day by those who instruct and control. So there's something not quite right in our outlook. You know, we're bombarded by tragedy daily, and we just become immune to it because we can't relate to the size of it. But we can relate to penguins and cry about it. So we have got emotional stuff in there. It's a question of how does it come out? Why is it that we hold these feelings in and then can lavish them on penguins and not people? Well, hopefully I've got a bit more an eye on trying to help people these days rather than line my pockets, because I don't do that anymore. I can still, you know, cry at the news because it can be so horrible, and also cry about penguins because I can relate to the penguin. What's going on? Anyway, some things are too big to relate to. We've rationalised the deaths of millions yearly and can only relate to the life of penguins one day at a time. Yeah. There is an expectation of fairness and an expectation that people will do the right thing in powerful positions. And those are resentments under construction, because every example of a person who is now in a position where they get lots of money, and when they are asked the question directly, do you think you're worth the salary that you're getting, they say yes. Well, what else could they say? And they will have every justification about, you know, transfer earnings. And what about footballers? Well, they entertain us, which is different. But when it comes to multinationals and corporations, they take your money. Anyway, here we go. The assumption of fairness and equality is primed to cause resentment when those in power keep on taking more out than they put into the system. The global system relies on the poor remaining poor, and the sick remaining sick, and the powerful remaining powerful. And I know I am powerless over all that. At the same time, I can see it. Leaders ought not reward themselves to greater degrees than they would take away from others. The notion that one organisation relies so heavily on one person that they deserve lavish treatment is a throwback and enchantment they would have you believe is true. Bob Diamond and his casino culture at the expense of shareholders and banking customers, and then a new safe pair of hands is being announced today. In other words, going backwards into ordinary banking, are they? Well, you won't see what they're doing because they'll be more clever at it next time. They may not accept their bonus for a year or two, but they maintain they are worth it because they say they are worth it. If you believe what they say, then that is insanity. Because behind a man or woman at the head of an organisation of greed beyond measure, an addiction to ego, and pleasure beyond most people's wildest dreams, it just makes people wild and reactionary today. And of course we will have a voice now via various means. But these are the insanities of living, the inconsistencies, and the dream that we could be that person. Well, unless you've got a steady state of how to get there, you aren't going to get there. And if you have aspirations beyond your ability to get there, because there is no path open to you, maybe you're young, unemployed, and can't get a job, or you're older and unemployed and can't get a job. There is absolutely no way of getting there. So there are resentments under construction unless you really understand needs met on a daily basis, and life will progress wherever it can go. Young, middle-aged, old-aged, needs met. This is why I may sound off from time to time about the inequalities, and anybody at the top of an organisation should not deny people further down the organisation the same rewards. So there's something wrong with the distribution of wealth. We have to have a lot of poor people so rich people can be rich. Haven't you worked that one out yet? Unless you print more money, in which case it's devalued and the rich remain rich and you still remain poor. That's how it's been working. So the reason for mentioning one or two of these issues in the public eye is that in the past I would drink on these things because they made me feel resentful in two ways. First, it was simply unfair, in my opinion, that these people were in a position to exploit nations and the populations therein, multinationals, multinational banks, global banking. And second, that as time went by in my careers, I felt the corruption and greed getting to me as well. It did, because more money is attractive. And if you don't really have an understanding of who you are, and in my case, well, I thought the job was it. Ethically, my values have always been about fairness, openness, honesty and willingness. And corporate life degraded these values one day at a time. I was not cut out for corporate life. And a dear friend from 30 years ago took me out one day and said, I think actually, she said two things. First, obviously you weren't cut out for it. And I said, she was right actually, but I denied it to myself and agreed with her, and she knew that. And then we went and had a beer, and she saw and observed the change of one drink in me, because she was sensitive to it, and she'd met alcoholics or people on the way to being an alcoholic, and she saw the impact on me and suggested maybe drinking wasn't a good idea. And I hadn't been drinking actually for quite a long time, so that one drink did impact greatly on me, and I thank her for that. But at the time I was in a place of denial. Yeah, I was not cut out for corporate life. I became competent in areas which I could do well in. Just because we are good at doing something, it does not mean we ought to be doing it. And that applies to work, relationships, and especially in my case, drinking. I did it really well. I was really good at drinking for a long time. Anyway, drink helped me fix my feelings and disappointments, undermined my personal values and made my expectations of reward grow ever more greedy as time went by. I could have been a Bob Diamond in the making. I don't think so, but my ego tells me, and my intellect tells me, I knew what he was doing and how he was doing it, because I knew about that sort of stuff. But I couldn't do it. I had a nervous breakdown on the way to the top. I'm glad I did, actually. It was the worst and the best thing that ever happened, and it nearly killed me, but I was lucky. As my doctor said, it was a locum, actually. He said, you're not at the end of your life, you're not at the beginning of your life, you're just sort of in the middle, so you can call it a midlife crisis. And that was the way he described it to me. At the time I was so resentful. I don't know, I could never have a midlife crisis. A, I'm too young. B, it couldn't happen to me. But the anxiety state and the nervous breakdown went on for years, because I couldn't cope with it all. It was not ego to control others for me, it was ego in a wholly undermining way, only valuing myself by the amount of money I could earn. I lost the ability to love, be loved back, and pursue a useful endeavour, with common good at the foundation day by day. Now, restored to sanity ? Contingent on me understanding where I've come from and what I can and cannot do today and every day. Learning the wisdom to know the difference. And common ground in fellowship helps me keep grounded one day at a time. Needs met, wants dissipate when I keep to my personal values of being fair, open, honest and willing. I can see the dangers around me and be able to accept that I am powerless in many respects. Over just about everything apart from my personal choices today. And it is in the personal choices today where I develop courage to change, faith in doing the next right thing, and confidence it's okay to be me. Doing what I can just one day at a time. It does not stop me from commenting or observing the inequality of life, that the poor are poor at the expense of the rich, who hold far more wealth than they could ever create on their own. The means of production. No wonder life and the world can drive us mad and insane one day at a time. Anyway, me, restored to sanity contingent on the day I ask for help. And the first part of this conundrum starts with me asking myself, this is me asking me, how do I feel and what can I do? Why and what can I do? And once I understand my emotional and spiritual state in the moment of now, how am I feeling? Am I coping? Whether it's good, bad or ugly, or a bit of all of them, I have a starting point. So, emotional, spiritual, how do I feel? Am I coping? What's on the agenda? And whatever is on my mind, whether it is to do with me personally, or how the world works, or just how unfair the world is depending on my point of view, that serenity prayer gives me perspective. The can do and the cannot do, the wisdom to know the difference, is the basis of the next right actions, either personally and locally, or expressing a view globally. So we have rights of expression and also know what we can and cannot do. And that's around open, honest and willing moral stance. And that's only something we can learn as we go along. And when we get things into the extremes of living or extremes of feeling, I say to myself, can do, can't do, wisdom to know the difference, because that serenity prayer gives me perspective. So when I say this is a personal belief system that you will have for yourself, your personal opinion and beliefs need be yours. AA is common ground, 12 steps, so you and I get our freedom of choice and understand what we can and cannot do daily. Often needs met, we don't build up resentments. So when I say to God and in good conscience, It's actually putting a bit of effort into this. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, but I can comment on them. Courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I can see I can change my personal conduct, not the conduct of other people. I can comment on the conduct of others, and yet it is not about me controlling them. It is about them being aware of their impact on me today. Most often, as with all positions of power, they lose their common touch and common understanding of what is going on in this mad, mad world today. So within the structures and elevations within institutions and organisations and government, the way of life becomes acceptable because that's how it all works. And the human transactions around feelings are limited. And people are valued by their resource value. Marginal cost equals marginal revenue, and all that old malarkey of economics. Which means if we still get some money out of the situation, we'll employ another person to make something or do something. It's a mad, mad world. So we are able to block out large amounts of pain we see in the world, but we can relate to penguins. We can speculate about horse meat and donkey meat being beef, and what happens when the recipe has changed so much that people like horse and donkey, and whether you can get a stock cube of horse or a stock cube of donkey to make it taste right again. And the cows ruminate on this. They don't have a choice. Anyway, we do. We have the freedom of choice to be ourselves and learn a bit today about who we are, how we tick, and how to be sober. And part of that is humour, part of that is accepting the feelings of outrage. How dare these people make themselves payments like that? How dare they corrupt the system so you don't know who's actually backing them anymore? How dare somebody out there give them a few billion quid so they don't have to borrow it off the government and declare all their naughty stuff going on? How dare they hide it all? They dare. They do dare. So here we are, one day at a time. I'm okay. It's nice to get things off your chest, and I've gone on a long time. I hope you switched off if you didn't find it interesting. But if you're still here, the Serenity Prayer is the one which cracks your nuts. It stops us being silly, stops us being physically damaging to ourselves and other people. We might swear at them a bit because they're doing damage. And I've used many words on my videos of a very Anglo-Saxon nature because they work for me. So I'm not suggesting you use rude words or anything, but use the language which works for you. And that applies to meetings as well. However you speak in your language, it needs to be acceptable to yourself. And sometimes we will offend others and their sensibilities. But we're all there for one thing, which is sobriety. So sobriety comes first at all costs in fellowship. A gentle reminder to myself on that one. So the Serenity Prayer, can do, can't do, wisdom to know the difference. I can do this, I can't do that. Wisdom to know the difference is growing. So to God, or to good conscience, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, one day at a time. I better not say any more, I'll get myself into trouble.